There were 5 friends together. They were just hanging out at home. But after that, out of nowhere, 2 men burst through the door. They were strangers, but they were armed. This entire night, it took a horrific turn nobody could see coming.
December 2000, Wichita, Kansas. A week-long crime spree ended in a snow-covered field at 2 a.m., where 5 people were found lying in the dark. 4 didn't survive. 1 woman did. Barefoot, wounded, and freezing, she walked more than a mile through the night to tell her story. What happened during those 7 days would expose unimaginable violence and change Wichita forever. The perpetrator's background. Reginald and Jonathan Carr grew up in Dodge City, Kansas. Reginald was born in 1977, Jonathan in 1980. Their childhood was marked by violence and instability that would set them on a dark path. Their home life was troubled from the start. Their mother later described the household as lacking warmth or love. The parents argued constantly, and physical violence was common. Their father abused their mother, who sometimes fought back with equal force. Once, she beat him with a baseball bat while the children watched. The trauma went deeper. Their father abused their older sister. When the parents divorced, he abandoned the family completely. Their mother's boyfriends allegedly continued the pattern of abuse. The boys lost their younger sister to leukemia when she was just 3 years old. Their mother remarried, but her second husband was equally violent, once putting a gun to her head. Eventually, the boys were sent to live with their grandmother, whose temper added to their unstable environment. Both brothers struggled in school and got into fights regularly. By 8th grade, they had attended 8 different schools. Reginald, despite being the older brother, sometimes took blame for Jonathan's actions, trying to protect him. The brothers turned to substances at shockingly young ages. Reginald was introduced to substances and alcohol at 6 years old. By 11, he was drinking hard liquor. Jonathan's pain manifested differently. He once attempted to end his life by drinking antifreeze. Their criminal histories began early. Reginald dropped out of high school in 9th grade after attacking another student. At 18, he went to prison for the first time. Multiple sentences followed for related offenses involving prohibited substances and aggravated assault. He was released from prison in March 2000. Here's where the system failed catastrophically. Reginald was arrested in November 2000 for assault, parole violations, and drunk driving. He should have stayed in prison. Instead, a paperwork error led to his release in December. During the very week he should have been locked up, he and his brother went on their crime spree. What drove them to Wichita remains unclear, but their arrival would leave the city scarred. The crime spree. The brothers' first known crime happened on a cold evening at a convenience store. Andrew Schreiber, a 23-year-old baseball coach at Wichita State University, stopped to buy chewing tobacco. 2 men approached him in the parking lot. One held a gun. They forced Andrew into his own car. One brother drove with him, while the other followed in a separate vehicle. Andrew was ordered to drive to multiple ATMs. He withdrew $800 before his card was blocked. The brothers then drove him to a field northeast of town, beat him with a pistol, and pushed him out. They shot out his tires and fled in the other vehicle. Andrew survived, badly shaken but alive. He would later identify Reginald in a police lineup, providing crucial evidence for what was to come. The brothers had tasted easy money and power. They weren't done. 3 days later, around 9:30 p.m., Ann Walenta pulled into her driveway in East Wichita. Ann was a 55-year-old librarian and cellist who played with the Wichita Symphony Orchestra. She was known for programs that introduced African American students to classical music. She was a devoted wife and mother. As she parked her SUV, a man approached, claiming he needed help. Ann suspected something was wrong. She had a feeling she was being followed. She cracked her window slightly to hear him. He immediately shoved a gun through the opening and ordered her not to move. A second man appeared beside the car. Ann made a split-second decision. Ignoring their commands, she tried to drive away. The man opened fire. The window shattered. 3 shots hit her body. 1 severed her spine. Ann was critically wounded but conscious. She pressed the car horn repeatedly, drawing a neighbor's attention. The neighbor called 911. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital, where she was paralyzed from the injuries. Despite her pain, Anne provided descriptions of her attackers to investigators. Detective Kevin Brasser feared the worst. He correctly predicted the attackers would strike again and again. Anne clung to life for 3 weeks, eventually identifying Reginald in a hospital lineup. On January 2, 2001, she passed away from a pulmonary embolism caused by her injuries. The violence was escalating, and police knew time was running out. 4 days after shooting Anne Walenta, the Carr brothers committed the crime that would define them forever. The events at 12,727 East Birchwood Drive became one of the most disturbing home invasions in American criminal history. 5 young people were spending a quiet evening together at a triplex condominium. Jason Beaufort, 26, a high school science teacher and basketball coach, lived with 2 roommates. Brad Haka, 27, who worked in finance, and Aaron Sander, 29, a former finance employee studying to become a priest. Jason's girlfriend, Holly, had come over with her dog, Nikki. Heather Muller, 25, a preschool teacher planning to become a nun, joined them. She and Aaron had dated before pursuing religious vocations, but remained close friends. It was supposed to be a cozy night. They ate dinner, watched TV, and prepared for bed. Jason made sure all the doors were locked. Around 11 p.m., the porch light flicked on. Holly and Jason heard Aaron talking to someone at the front door. Voices grew louder, turning into shouts. Their bedroom door flew open. A tall man with a gun entered, dragging Aaron at gunpoint. A shorter man followed. Both were armed. The intruders wore specific clothing. The taller one had a black leather coat, gloves, and an orange FUBU sweater. The shorter one had clumped, poofy hair. Their features suggested they were brothers. Holly's dog, Nikki, growled. One gunman threatened to shoot her unless Holly complied, which she did immediately. The intruders demanded to know if anyone else was in the apartment. Brad and Heather were brought in. All 5 were forced to remove their clothing at gunpoint. For roughly 3 hours, terror consumed the house. One gunman ransacked for valuables, while the other demanded money and safes. The victims offered all they had. The assaults began. Holly and Heather were forced to act on each other. Brad, Jason, and Aaron were beaten when they refused to comply. The friends in the closet, shivering and crying, could only listen. During a pause, the attackers searched for car keys. Jason finally found his truck keys. A popcorn tin revealed an engagement ring Jason had planned to give Holly on December 22nd. One intruder pocketed it without emotion. The attackers forced each victim to withdraw cash from ATMs. Holly, wearing only a sweater from the waist up, endured the freezing cold and inappropriate comments while complying. Back at the house, she was assaulted again. Around 2 a.m., the intruders decided to move the victims. Holly and Heather were led to Jason's truck. The 3 men were locked in the trunk of Aaron's Honda Accord. At Stryker Soccer Complex, the victims were ordered to kneel in the snow. Aaron pleaded for mercy. Then came the shots. Holly felt the impact, but miraculously remained conscious. A butterfly hair clip deflected the bullet. She played dead as the truck ran over the 5 bodies. Jason, Brad, Aaron, and Heather were gone. Holly, bloodied and naked, began the mile-long trek to safety through snow-covered fields, past barbed wire fences, a construction site, and thick brush. Every passing light terrified her. She finally reached a house decorated for Christmas and pounded on the door. A young couple saw her and wrapped her in blankets. Before calling 911, she recounted everything, giving the dispatcher the exact location of her friends. Meanwhile, the Carr brothers returned to the triplex, continuing to ransack the home and steal valuables. By the end of the night, Nikki did not survive. Holly lived through it, but the events of December 14th to 15th left permanent scars, becoming one of the darkest chapters in American criminal history. The night of terror was finally over, but the investigation was just beginning. The investigation and arrests. Detective Rick Craig was among the first responders at the field around 3 a.m. Shivering in the bitter wind, he saw 4 naked bodies lying in bloodied snow, each with a gunshot wound to the back of the head. "I wasn't cold anymore," he later said. All 4 were confirmed dead. Holly was briefly interviewed before paramedics rushed her to the hospital. Alert and coherent, she provided crucial descriptions of the attackers and their stolen truck. The medical miracle that saved her was extraordinary. The bullet had been deflected by her butterfly hair clip, and the truck had failed to crush her body. Against all odds, she had survived. That morning, December 15th, District Attorney Nola Fulston was informed of the quadruple homicide. Shockingly, another unrelated quadruple homicide had occurred just 8 days earlier, on December 7th. The news stunned Wichita. Television stations broadcast Jason's truck plate number, asking for public assistance. Christian Taylor, watching the news at home, realized he had seen the matching truck parked near his apartment that morning. He called police, who confirmed it was Jason's truck. Another resident reported helping a man carry a large-screen TV into an upstairs apartment. Pointing out the unit, officers surrounded it. A tall black man stepped onto the balcony, froze when seeing officers, then retreated. A white woman, Stephanie Donnelly, answered the door. Police rushed inside, handcuffing the man as he tried to escape. The man was identified as Reginald Carr, 22, with an extensive criminal record. He perfectly matched Holly's description of the taller gunman. Donnelly was confirmed as his girlfriend. Police suspected the shorter man was his younger brother, Jonathan, driving a late-model Plymouth Fury. This detail went out in news reports. By that afternoon, Andrew Schreiber saw Reginald's face on TV and immediately recognized him from a December 8th robbery, confirming he was one of the attackers. Around the same time, healthcare worker Tony Green noticed her daughter's boyfriend at home and realized he matched the description of the second gunman. Trusting her instincts, she checked his jacket and found a small jewelry box containing a diamond engagement ring that had been reported stolen. When she spotted the Plymouth Fury parked outside, the reality hit her. Someone responsible for the violence was inside her house. Tony quietly told her daughter to grab her young niece and leave immediately, abandoning shoes in the snow. The 3 fled to a neighbor to call 911. Jonathan Carr, standing on the porch, bolted when he saw them. Police arrived quickly, gave chase, and apprehended him 2 blocks away. Officers recovered roughly $1,000 and the stolen engagement ring from his pockets. Within 12 hours, both brothers were in custody. Ann Walenta, still hospitalized, immediately identified Reginald from a lineup. Holly, once able, also confirmed him. Warrants were executed to collect DNA, hair, blood, and saliva from both. During questioning, Jonathan asked Detective Kelly Otis about the December 7th quadruple homicide and the potential death penalty. Otis explained lethal injection and capital punishment, leaving Jonathan visibly unsettled. Ann Walenta later died in the hospital, officially becoming the 5th victim of the Carr brothers. The handgun used in the crimes was recovered along Route 96 near the execution field. Kansas State Crime Lab analysis confirmed it had been used in the deaths of the 4 friends, Walenta's shooting, and the attack on Andrew Schreiber's vehicle. Within a single day, the Carr brothers' spree had ended, leaving a trail of horror, shock, and a small measure of survival through Holly's extraordinary resilience. The full extent of the brothers' crimes during this period was never truly determined, but there was no doubt about their responsibility for these 3 separate incidents. Community impact and reaction. Wichita was overcome by a wave of fear. The community had felt safe before. The random nature of the attacks was especially chilling. Anyone could have been a victim. There was an immediate spike in sales of home security systems, guns and firearms, locks and deadbolts, and alarm systems. Residents were taking safety into their own hands. The Wichita Eagle wrote, "The randomness of the attacks was especially chilling. It could have been anyone, but we go on with our work, hold our loved ones a little closer, and face down our fears as best we can. The survivors are showing us how." Because the victims were all white and the Carr brothers are black, some commentators argued hate crime charges should be pursued. District Attorney Nola Folston dismissed the idea. She stated that these appeared to be isolated incidents where individuals were chosen at random. The fact that the defendants and victims happened to be of different races had no bearing on the charges. Mayor Bob Knight stated that the victims were innocent people who suffered at the hands of someone who was little more than an animal. He wasn't looking at it as a black and white issue. He noted he wasn't a big fan of capital punishment, but if anything deserved people losing their lives, it was this kind of terrible crime. Certain white supremacist groups latched onto the case and used the crimes to push their agendas, promoting it as an example of a hate crime directed at white people. Many Wichita residents felt such terrible actions couldn't be done without hatred motivating them, but there was no evidence to back up racial animus. The actions were terrifying enough without a racial motive. The brothers' apparent motivation was robbery and the thrill of violence. Some conservative commentators claimed the crimes were downplayed and that national media suppressed the story due to political correctness. Thomas Sowell, an African-American conservative, argued the media has a double standard regarding interracial offenses, tending to play up terrible crimes by whites against blacks, while playing down equally terrible crimes by blacks against whites. The December 7th case, which happened 8 days before the Carr brothers' crimes, involved 4 young black people taken by a young black man who had a personal relationship with at least one victim. There were no random victim selections, no assaults committed, no prolonged torture or violent component. The culprit was convicted and is serving life with no possibility of parole before 2014. The Wichita Eagle noted these events received less media coverage than the Carr brothers' crimes. A relative of a December 7th victim asked how one could be any worse than the other if the results were the same. It was a valid question about media attention disparities. Court TV originally promised to broadcast the entire trial, then changed their mind and said they would only broadcast opening statements and survivor testimony. They changed their mind again and only provided brief news reports. The mysterious reduction in coverage commitment raised questions. The legal proceedings. The Carr brothers faced 113 charges, including capital offenses, aggravated kidnapping, robbery, multiple counts of assault, aggravated robbery, animal cruelty for Nikki's death, and various weapons charges. Jury selection began on September 9th, 2002, at the Sedgwick County Courthouse, and was completed on October 2nd. The trial started on October 7th, 2002, and lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming physical and forensic evidence. Hawley's powerful testimony relived the events over 2 days with the jury, describing what happened in difficult detail. Andrew Schreiber testified about his abduction. Ann Walenta's deathbed identification was presented. Ballistics evidence, DNA evidence, and the brothers' attempts to blame each other all pointed to their guilt. The defense strategy involved each brother trying to blame the other. Reginald portrayed Jonathan as a corrupted younger brother. Jonathan portrayed Reginald as a corrupting older brother. Their sister testified that she thought Reginald admitted to being the one who shot the victims, but later backtracked, saying she didn't remember who shot whom. On November 4th, 2002, the jury returned guilty verdicts. The brothers were found guilty of most charges against them, including capital offenses, aggravated kidnapping and robbery, assault, and animal cruelty. On November 15th, 2002, both brothers were sentenced to death.
Death penalty upheld. That's the ruling from the state Supreme Court in the Jonathan and Reginald Carr case. The brothers were convicted of capital murder for going on a crime spree that left 5 people dead. They were sentenced together.
The judge ruled that aggravating circumstances were proved beyond reasonable doubt, and the jury unanimously agreed to death sentences. The appeals process has stretched over 2 decades. In 2004, the Kansas Supreme Court overturned Kansas's death penalty law, and the brothers' death sentences were temporarily commuted to life imprisonment. The Kansas Attorney General appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which upheld the constitutionality of the death penalty in Kansas, reinstating the law. Multiple reversals and reinstatements followed. The brothers raised various constitutional challenges, arguing that the joint sentencing proceeding was unfair and that jury instructions on circumstances were problematic. In 2016, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a major ruling in Kansas versus Carr. Justice Scalia delivered the opinion, joined by 6 other justices. The court held that the joint sentencing proceeding was not fundamentally unfair, and there was no need to instruct the jury that certain circumstances don't need proof beyond reasonable doubt. The court noted the brothers' acts of almost inconceivable cruelty and depravity. Justice Sotomayor filed a dissenting opinion. The death sentences were reinstated. In April 2024, the brothers were denied a new hearing request.
The U.S. Supreme Court is refusing to hear any more appeals from Jonathan and Reginald Carr, which means their death sentence is considered final.
Both raised concerns that prospective jurors were not properly questioned about racial biases, noting they are black and the victims were white. Reginald pointed to an investigation into the Wichita Police Department that revealed officers exchanging inappropriate texts and images, with several officers disciplined. One officer involved in the brothers' investigation was among those disciplined. Jonathan later argued that his trial attorneys failed to investigate key evidence and said Reginald held strong influence over him as the younger brother, alleging a pattern of control and mistreatment. The narrative presented Reginald as the driving force, with Jonathan shaped by that influence. Both brothers remain incarcerated under the most severe sentencing conditions at El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas, the same prison that also houses Dennis Rader, widely known as BTK. Their appeals are still ongoing. The Wichita horror remains one of the most disturbing crime sprees in American history. 5 lives were stolen. One survivor endured unimaginable trauma to bring justice. 2 decades later, the legal battle continues while the victims' families wait for closure. If this story affected you, please subscribe to stay informed about true crime cases that shaped our communities.